A former general manager reveals Pete Alonso's market and where he should expect to land. Plus, the guys over at the Mets pod talk about a game-changing player outside of Alonso that the New York Mets could add this offseason. Let's break it down next on Metcast. What's going on, friends? Welcome back to another offseason edition of the Metcast. As always, I am Rain. If you're enjoying this content, all I ask you to do is like and subscribe, turn those notifications on so you never miss any of the Mets news that you need to know. And something that we've talked about all offseason, this past August, September, October, now we're in November, is Pete Alonso and the contract he could expect. And there's no guesses around it. Scott Boras put it out there early that Pete Alonso would be seeking a 7-year contract, which I absolutely said, no, thank you. And our boy Joe DeMayo on the Mets pod, who we had on, said, I probably wouldn't go beyond 4 years, but a former New York Mets general manager, Steve Phillips, broke down what kind of contract Alonso could be looking at, and he named several teams that could be involved, which I'll be honest with you, as a Mets fan, kind of freaks me out. Pete is the ultimate homegrown Met and deserves to have his number retired in the bleachers or in the stands, whatever you want to say it, in the future, breaking 500 home runs and potentially landing in the Hall of Fame as a Met. But enough of that. Let's give it a look.
We just did this exercise with Pete Alonso. We're hearing 7. How true is that? And what do you think is realistic?
Yeah, I think it's his desire, but it's not reality.
Thank you. Thank you. 7 years, Pete's gone. Hell, even 6 years, there's no shot. And I would dare say 5 years. I would be willing to go 5 if it meant the last year was some type of deal where you look at some of the averages around baseball. He gets high AAV years 1 through 4 and kind of a say goodbye. You buy him out the last year where you send him off into the sunset. But 7 years from Scott Boras, simply not realistic.
I mean, right-handed hitting first basemen who are somewhat one-dimensional, and he's not a great defender, means that, and he had a good year this year. Listen, he came back, he's bet on himself, he had a good year, but I still don't think it's going to convince anybody to give him a 5-year, 6-year, 7-year deal. He's going to play himself in.
And before Steve keeps going, something that I've been hearing is that look out for the Red Sox. Former Mets beat reporter Tim Healy, who now covers the Red Sox full-time, put out an article early in the offseason, and the rumblings are there. The Red Sox think that if they add enough offense and one more legitimate starting pitcher, considering they may lose their third baseman, but one more starting pitcher, add a little bit more power, they feel they can contend in the AL East, as the Yankees may not be the dominant powerhouse. And with Toronto being more competitive, it actually may help Boston, because now it's not just them trying to beat up on the Yankees. Now you have Toronto in there as well, who, may I add, a New York Mets pitcher that I thought, a Blue Jays pitcher that I thought the Mets would be involved in, Shane Bieber, just opted into next year with Toronto. He says there's unfinished business there. I thought he was a guy that the New York Mets could potentially target, but no longer.
Into being a DH. And not everybody wants to lock in on that DH role. So I think he's more likely going to just have to accept the reality that he's probably.
The issue with what Steve is saying is very simple. And I've brought it up on this podcast multiple times. They talk about Alonso, if he gets a 5-year deal, maybe in 2 years he shifts to DH. Everyone forgets about Brandon Nimmo. Brandon Nimmo is the future DH of this team. We could sit here and try to act like it's not there. The guy has plantar fasciitis. He will have that the rest of his life. The defensive statistics are out there. He's going to lose a little bit of speed in the outfield. He already doesn't have a strong arm. He still is a very reliable bat at the plate. If you're going to sign Pete Alonso to a 4 or 5-year deal, you got to get at least 3 years, probably 4 years in the field, because I think within the next 2 years, Brandon Nimmo is probably going to be that Starling Marte where he might start 1 or 2 days in the outfield and spend the other 3 or 4, whatever it ends up being, at DH for this team.
We at most going to get a 4-year deal. and that should be okay. Like he's made a
He's
lot of
thinking
money 1 year
4-year
at a
deal.
time.
I
Take the
agree.
4 years of security, and I think certainly the Mets will have interest. The Red Sox, at some point, you've got to say with Tristan Casas, it's not working. If you lose Bregman, then Alonso could give you a big power bat, and that green monster with Alonso would be amazing there. Cincinnati could use a big power bat and a veteran.
I see Cincinnati. I keep hearing Cincinnati. Cincinnati doesn't play with the big boys. They just simply don't. You got the Red Sox, the Yankees, the Dodgers, San Diego, Toronto, Mets, Phillies, potentially Braves, who, shout out to Richardson, the Mets first base coach is gone. And I got a little tidbit for you guys on that as well. That's why I refused to overreact when I heard all this stuff. Rumblings have it is that Richardson demanded it put in his contract that if a better opportunity presented itself, he could leave the team mid-season or something like that. Maybe you guys know better. Let me know down in the comments. But that's the rumbling, which I think is absolutely nuts. You're either committed or you're not. And he's not committed. So you say, see you later. I'm not going to overreact to the Mets losing a first base coach. At the end of the day, talent rules all. And if Juan Soto wants to do what he did last year and really wants to be a great base runner the way he was last year and put that effort in, he could do the same thing next year, in my opinion. I don't think a simple first base coach could drastically change anyone's game.
Hitter and a guy that is so gung-ho that I think he pulls people around. And even the Nationals, if they're looking for that veteran to...
That's a little bit of an outreach. The Nationals, come on. If Pete Alonso wants to win, you could justify the Reds to me a little bit. Boston, absolutely. The Mets, absolutely. The Nationals are still 2 or 3 years away. The Phillies are going to continue to be strong at the top of the division. Something I had a discussion with the other day with one of the people that I'm very close with, who's close with the Mets. I said, the gap is there. Anybody who thinks there's not a significant gap between the Mets and the Phillies, I have a bridge to sell you in Brooklyn. That's my biggest concern. I've been saying it all offseason. I know you guys probably feel the same way. The Mets need to make up significant ground to catch up to the Phillies. And they got to do it quickly. Who knows what this next CBA is? And then you see the rumors out there today. The Dodgers may go gung-ho all over again, sign every big free agent, trying to win a third in a row before this CBA changes things.
Lead this young group of kids. Alonso's sort of an okie dokie, sort of a corny leader guy that I think he'd fit in nice with those young kids there. And I think Seattle, if they lose Naylor, I could see him going out to the West Coast as well.
And he's going to post Steve every single day. Hasn't missed a game since 2020.
And that's what we have from Steve Phillips in regard to Pete Alonso. Now I want to get over to the boys over at the Mets pod. They bring up a player that I would absolutely consider, not on a crazy long-term deal, but when you talk about run prevention, he is the guy, plain and simple. And I'll have a video coming out later in the week, wink, wink, maybe tomorrow, on a player that I'm kind of hearing a little bit of rumblings that may surprise you guys, but let's get to their video.
Alex Bregman, who I think would be an interesting
Gold Glover, great defender, clutch hitter, does it in October. Do I need to keep going on? World champion.
Add because he has incredible leadership skills, brings a different type of player to the table.
Yep.
It's not your typical masher that you're always looking for. There's going to be average. There's going to be on base percentage. There's some pop, but you got the defensive flexibility to play him at second base or play him at third base. And what if there's a world that the Mets include Jet Williams in a trade to get Tarek Skubal? And
you took the words.
Not Jet. We just had Jet on the podcast. I'll link that video, that exclusive interview that I had with him at the end of this video, but not Jet Williams. Come on, guys. The first player I get on the show, you're going to trade him?
Right out of my mouth.
And send Jeff McNeil somewhere for pitching or whatever. Second base is now wide open for the taking. You could sign Bregman and call him your second baseman. Or you can slide Brett Beatty over to second and play Bregman at his most comfortable position.
Now, look, I like Alex Bregman here. And if I had a choice, it would be Bregman at third, Beatty at second. Beatty showed last year he could be a very solid defender. And if you tell him in the offseason, hey, you are the starting second baseman, work your tush off, getting great at second base. It's about run prevention. Then you can afford to have a Pete Alonso over at first base because there's going to be less balls in the dirt. Bregman will get the balls in the hole, and now all of a sudden you have gold, or potential gold all over the diamond. Lindor's very solid. Pete's not the greatest, but if you want to help him and his longevity over at first base, you make the players around him better. Hopefully, Alvy takes that. You have Terrence, who was a Gold Glove finalist this past year, so that maybe be the way to go. I think that's where I would like to go, but I think the Mets are going to be so focused on bringing back Edwin Diaz and Pete Alonso and adding a legitimate front end starter to this rotation. Dare I say Joe Ryan, because that is a name that keeps popping up everywhere I'm looking. They're going to be fielding calls over there. Whether or not they can get a deal done or not remains to be seen. I don't see the Mets going full bore all in on Tariq Skubal as MLB Network does. And that's just not a simple, that's not what David Stearns likes to do. But that's all I got for you guys today. Leave a comment below. I'm going to link the Jet Williams video right here on the screen, so make sure you click it if you want to hear the exclusive interview. Jet goes into the analytics, where he feels he's going to play, his development, being drafted by the Mets, what it means to be a New York Met. It was an exclusive interview, and I can't appreciate him more than I already do. Thanks so much, guys. God bless. Let's go Mets. Take care.